Hello, this is Dr. Antoinette Linton, and I am going to do a short presentation on looking at teaching through the lens of JEIE and introduce the JEIE matrix to my courses. I want us to get started by looking at some of these concepts. To get us started, I want us to have a common language about what we mean for teacher practice and learning. A teacher is a trustworthy content expert whose intentionality and integrity of practice facilitates learning. A teacher or a teacher's practice is the planning, the enactment, and interpretation and translation of student learning performances that reliably produce the epistemic, intellectual, and creative agency that empowers students to pursue their professional endeavors of their choosing. In other words, we lay the foundation for students getting prepared to be functional adults in society. And they will engage in many roles. So you have to understand that, like my mentor, Etta Holland states, teaching is the parent of all professions. It's also the place where we get to socialize with others in functional and healthy ways as well. So keep that in mind as we learn teaching, learn about students, and learn about the function of schooling. Lastly, I want us to understand when I say learning, I'm talking about the use of cognitive tools, cultural artifacts, and knowledge that students bring from their communities, their elders, previous learning, their funds of knowledge in order to solve problems. That's what I'm talking about. Learning has some memorization components, sure. Learning definitely has some discourse components, but the root of what I'm talking about is the very sophisticated way that students engage in problem solving by using all their tools. And we provide them with those experiences so that they can learn how to use their tools. This week, as you think about why you want to become a teacher, I want to introduce what it means to be a teacher when we view the profession through the JEIE lens. What does it mean to teach for equity, diversity, inclusion, expansion, and translanguaging? Well, this video will help you wrap your mind around what this all means. While viewing this video, please review the JEIE matrix for details about the type of evidence and indicators that you may see in the field or in the videos we have selected for you. Keep in mind that it's okay if you do not see evidence of all of the categories happening all the time. What's more important is that you ask yourself why you may see some categories and why not others. Are the attributes of the schools and classrooms where these concepts are enacted? And what are the attributes of the schools and classrooms where these concepts are not? The JEIE matrix can be found in the Google Classroom associated with this course, and it can be found in the Canvas. If anyone who is not in this course is viewing this video, please just email me. I can send it to you. The matrix has 6 categories, and you will be directed to observe their absence or their presence over the course. We will take on one category at a time and spend roughly 1 to 2 weeks observing how the concept emerges in schools and classrooms. Each category has indicators and evidence examples so that you know what to look for. Your task is to describe 1 or 2 examples of each category in your fieldwork experience and then make connections to your developing teacher practice. These will be shared in the Google Classroom. The first category we will directly observe is equity this week. You will have roughly 2 weeks to focus on this concept as you enter schools and learn about teaching. Okay, so what does equity look like? The teacher uses supports and constructs language and symbols from the student's culture, social group, experience, and history. You have learned and earned the right to use culturally sanctioned social interactions and practices, and you include culturally valued knowledge in the curricular content. You are looking for evidence in the videos that we have shared and in the field work, uh, in the plans that teachers make. You may interview students and or the teacher to find out if some of these equity ideas are being enacted. Discussions and assessments often include strategies for validating the learner's culture and the learning that has taken place already while intentionally addressing students' learning challenges. So, this is how some teachers provide intentional support for all students based on need. Next, we have inclusion. That's the commitment to structuring our educational system so that all students, regardless of race, disabilities, gender, family structure, etc., are educated together as part of a community. All students get a voice and have opportunities to use their voices and talents. Their talents are recognizable to the teacher. So, what does this look like in the classroom? It means that there is structured time and unstructured opportunities for kids to use the best parts of their intellect, their wit, their previous knowledge, their funds of knowledge. For example, I trusted that my students would safely handle the laboratory equipment and demonstrated this by leaving out the tools for the intended uses by the kids. So I was a science teacher for 14 years. And part of inclusion into the learning experiences was to make sure that my kids engaged in developmentally appropriate work that scientists do. And many times it was leaving the equipment out so that they could use it as they're solving problems. Okay, so one student pointed out that they noticed that I reward and punish the students equally, and that I wasn't afraid to leave the materials out. Um, a student who is disruptive often got the same amount of fairness, attention, reprimands as the student who only has been disruptive maybe once or twice. It's the behavior that is the focus, not the student, and it's the intention to learning that is the focus. Not, I teach biology, I don't teach students. It's reverse for me. I teach students, and I want them to get the ins and outs of the intellectual creativity and problem solving that biology has to offer. This is important for establishing trust for the kids and trust in you by the children. A teacher's consistency and the ability to include all the students in the learning is key. Okay, diversity. The acknowledgement, value, appreciation of divergent thought, cultural, racial, ethnic expression, and socioeconomic experiences. So, what does this look like in the classroom? Learning one strength, one challenge, one talent, and hobby of each student is a practice that many teachers do when they're expressing their awareness of diversity. Once you learn about these things with your students, remember it's like a strength, a challenge, a talent, a hobby. Then you use this information in your examples, analogies, vignettes, demonstrations, and supports that you provide for the students. So, what does this look like? In a lesson plan, it's the examples of the customized interventions you have developed for the students, right? It's not generic one size fits all um, responsive teaching, right? It's it's a it's an understanding that you have a whole class, you have groups of students who work well together, and then you have individual students who may need a little something extra, but they all have access to learning and they all have access to a number of different ways of entering into the learning experience. Students will notice how masterful the teacher is who does this kind of work. How much more they learn and enjoy the classroom is usually some of the retorts that they have with teachers who have mastered this concept of diversity. You were looking for evidence in the videos and in the field work of teachers who keep records of student strengths, challenges, talents, and experiences in and out of school to make linkages between home and school. The use of student experiential knowledge in their examples, models, analogies, vignettes, demonstrations, um, these things make learning meaningful and relevant for the students. The tools and methods are chosen to support students' academic achievement and socialization with each other. So bear and keep that in mind. Our next concept is expansion, and this is something new. I originally got this concept from a gentleman who gets his hair cut by my brother. He's the dean of the University of Kentucky School of Social Work, and him and I were talking one evening about these kinds of concepts that really help kids and really help them thrive in a society that's getting more complicated. And expansion is something that he came up with. And this meant that expansion in social work and expansion in education are kind of related, but I had to like educize this so that it would be functional. But I enjoy this idea a great deal. It's the intentionally planned learning experiences for students to be self-determined, empowered, and provided opportunities to engage in the practices that are academically, culturally, and socially valued to society. This is the root of choice for kids, having them have a say in their own learning and their own development in developmentally appropriate ways, mind you. But this right here is our intention as teachers to get the kids not to need us by the end of the year, that they've mastered these skills and they can initiate these skills by themselves. They can work well with others when using the skills to solve a common problem. They could teach someone else how to use the skills. So this is really like the next step when it comes to how we want to empower our students, this concept of expansion to our lessons and our teaching. So the concept of expansion includes the ideas that we teach students so that eventually they don't need us to learn. The objective is self-determination and independence. If we are planning for expansion, that means the students are leading conversations. They are making choices about the problems they want to solve with our guidance. They can engage in developmentally appropriate activities that are grounded in the norms of the professions that our subject areas represent. You are looking for evidence in the videos and in the field work of teachers who could create classroom community plans that foster risk-taking, translanguaging, and self-expression, reciprocity between the students and the teachers and within the students themselves. Learning plans to help students develop the abilities necessary for problem solving with others in ways that benefit the group socially, academically, and also with their future endeavors. Translanguaging. So translanguaging is the knowledge and demands on teachers for new knowledge and practices that support adaptation skills development to educate children with bilingual and polylingual skills for students' academic and social achievement, right? So translanguaging allows us to create classrooms and academic routines that make sense to the students. This includes language and ability accessibility routines. So what are we looking for in the classroom? We're looking for classroom routines and academic processes uh, that are presented in the home language and represented in the classroom. For instance, I would consider myself an emerging bilingual in Spanish, right? And my first 7 years of teaching, I was teaching mostly Mexican American students. So I had my very first year, I had a student who spoke no English. He only spoke Spanish. So I had my kids create a word wall or a phrase wall for me. I tell this story all the time because this is my lived experience. And the students and I would work together to help me translate some teacher-derived language so that I could communicate with my students who were also emergent bilinguals in English. So I learned a lot of Spanish. They taught me a lot of Spanish. We used a language skill. We used a phrase wall. I got a big piece of butcher paper, taped it onto the wall so that it was accessible to myself and my students. And whenever I said the term como se dice, I needed something translated so I could flow with my language and my teaching. Kids would come up, translate it for me phonetically so I could read it. And I would practice it with my students, and they could see the effort in my translanguaging so that I could be of service to them as they were learning this academic biology language. So that's what I mean by classroom routines and academic processes presented in the home language, represented in the classroom. So, do we provide visuals, directions, demonstrations besides the traditional written ways? How willing are we to help students who need additional time, different scaffolds, and different accommodations? How willing are we as teachers, especially as monolingual teachers, willing to accommodate our own monolingualism, willing to set it aside and struggle along with students who are learning, the academic language? How, then do we struggle with students ourselves and not take this kind of adage of, well, I'm the teacher. I have the degree, I have the license. I don't have to do that kind of work. I'm the adult. I have the authority, right? I don't have to understand or meet you where you are. And when we do that, we don't teach how to solve problems and be good community members when we do that as adults. What we end up teaching our students is that as long as we have a certain amount of authority, we don't have to empathize with you. We don't have to regard you. We don't even have to have the skill sets needed to teach you. We don't have to even go and get those. And so they grow up thinking, as long as I get some authority, I don't have to show up. I don't have to engage with people where they are. And we don't want to give that message. Um, we want to be very cognizant of the fact that uh, we're all learners. And for me, the biggest learning that I ever had to do outside of getting to know my students as individuals was when there were multiple languages in the room and I needed to meet my kids linguistically where they were, then I became an emergent bilingual myself. Um, the struggle is real. Uh, the answers to these questions, how willing are we to help students who need additional time, different scaffolds and accommodations, and then acting on the answers with kindness, help us be more inclusive and caring in a translanguaging world. So you were looking for evidence in the videos and the classrooms where teachers' curriculum and the text includes cultural discourse that is represented represented of the students in the classroom. Use of texts that possess student language represented in the classroom, which includes examples and models of ways that students benefit from academic knowledge in the present and in the future, and how they can use the skills that they develop to participate productively in the local community and in the nation. Language is situated in the classroom so that students experience positive representations of themselves and their language. All languages are equal, right? Um, Educational justice occurs and is ensured when all of those categories that we just explained are in place and planned for intentionally. Inclusion, diversity, expansion, translanguaging, and equity put together equal justice. These concepts are interrelated and occur across all experiences students have when they're in our care. Educational justice, where students are provided learning experiences where they leave whole, included, accepted, and educated in such a way that they can be self-determined and equipped to take care of themselves, is the goal here. This is not to be confused with criminal justice, where systems have a crime, a victim, a perpetrator, fault finding, and punishment. We aren't talking about that because we aren't lawyers or people who work for the criminal justice system. We are educators who facilitate the development of young people so that they can eventually solve the problems in our communities and in the nation. In conclusion, here's a point to ponder. Schooling is multifaceted, challenging, and should prepare students for work, socialization, politics, self-determinant learning, ideas, and skill development. How can teachers create learning spaces where students have these opportunities? If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. I hope you enjoyed teaching through a JEIE lens. Thank you.